You can search through the list, they are by name, or you can click on last alter. When you click on it once, it goes from the most oldest to most recent. If you click on it again, then it goes from the most recent to most oldest. So you can click on last alter, or you can click on any one of these fields, and that's how you can filter or you can sort your items. If you have created a table, when you right click on an object and you go to the description, it will tell you that this object is a table. If it is not a table, then when you right click on it and go to description, it tells you that it's a physical file. So behind the scene, it keeps track of tables from the physical files, but they're all listed in the same place because they're used as a source of data storage. Now, to create a table in this environment, you simply right click on the tables and you go under new and tables. So let's do this together. So you go under tables, new table. Okay, everybody with me so far? Okay. The name of the table is, I'll turn on my caps lock, it's easier to read, is lecturer. I'd like to identify for your benefit, and this will help you not next semester, but we're going to help you a year from now when you are in RPG. And we're going to talk about it again. When you're talking to a database from other languages, then this step is not needed. But if you're talking to an RPG, like RPG program is talking to a database table, then this step is needed. Why? Because if you remember in physical files, what was the first thing that you did after you opened the physical file? What was the first thing that you did before you listed any of your fields? Now, before you list any of your fields, what is the first line? What do you do on the very first line? Record format. Okay, already forgot about it? Okay, so record format, very important for CL, for RPG, because your record format is how your RPG program or CL program will identify the fields. When you leave it as system generated, what happens is that your record format is given the same name as your table. Okay? Other languages like Java, C#, VB, they don't care about record formats. They just need the name of the table and the fields. But RPG looks at the record format, looks at the table name, and goes nuts. How can two objects be called the same? So it can't read the data. It says, there's an ambiguity in the name. I don't know, who am I supposed to read? It goes to the table, finds the same name, goes to the record format, finds the same name. So for those kind of languages, if I know that one of those languages are being used in-house and I'm developing a database, I'm going to come out here in the record format name, I'll select this and I'll get rid of it. I'm going to write a name different than what I've already given as the name of the table. Okay, so I'm going to write, let's say, RECLEC, like something different, which is not the same as the name of the table. Again, needed for only those languages which read by record format. Those languages that read by table, this step is not needed for them. Now, moving on to columns. The next tab. You simply click to add a column by clicking the add button, and then you get a dialog box. In this dialog box, you can start listing the names of the field, you can pick the data type, you can pick the field length. So we're going to call this one lecturer ID, character size 5, add, lecturer name, varchar size 30, add. Yeah, you can find it in the list. If you click the drop-down box, you'll find VAR-CHAR in the list. So these are the two items that I picked this far, lecturer ID and lecturer name. Now, let me click close by simply hitting the X at the top. Make sure that you have these two fields. Do not click OK yet. We have some modifications to make, but I would like you to have these two fields created. In fact, yesterday, someone was trying to do that, and the language that they were using didn't allow for that. We're going to give them errors. Okay, now let's do something else here before we move on to the next tab. Is I want to make some modifications to the fields that I've already created. So I'm going to click on the lecturer ID, and I'm going to click on the definition button located on the right. Now, when the definition button is clicked, you get to see the same dialog box that you were looking at before. My idea is to promote lecturer ID to a primary key. So I have to make sure that nullable checkbox is unchecked. Why? Because a primary key cannot be null. Because primary key is by which you will identify a record uniquely. It's pretty much like you have to identify the US citizens, but you'll say, I'm not going to give you a social security number. So this is a way by which things can be identified as unique, but you have to make sure that they are nullable is unchecked. They are forced to be not null. Click OK here, and you will notice that in the nullable column, it says no. It was saying yes, now it says no. Okay, we'll repeat the same process for the name. I'll say, okay, definition, uncheck nullable, and click OK. So it's also unchecked. Done. Now let's move to the next tab, which is key constraints. Let's click the add button. We're going to choose primary key between the two radio buttons. We're going to click on lecturer ID and click add. And then we're going to click OK. Done? Okay. So we are in the key constraints. We click the add button. We chose the radio button, primary key. Then we clicked on the field, and then we click add. Now let's say if I want to make any changes to what I've just done. Again, I click on the field and I click on definition. So let's click on definition again. So these are the three things I did. Primary key, promoted the name by clicking on it, and then clicked OK. Right? Okay. Now again, if I let the system generate the primary key, the system generated primary key will be generated for me. If I want to write my own name, then I can come up here and I can decide to write my own name by saying I want it to be PK underscore LEC ID. So I can let the system come up with its own name, or I can override and write my own name. Okay. Now what does it say to the left of that name? Constraint name. Constraint. There are 5 kinds of constraints in any databases, and primary key is one of those kinds of constraints. What's a constraint? Constraint by definition means limitation. Something that you are limiting. Okay. Now, what does primary key limit to? You cannot enter duplicates. Okay, that's a limitation. You cannot leave it null. You can leave it blank. That's a limitation. Okay. What is primary key used for? Primary key is used for linking a table with another table. That's what primary key is used for. Okay, so once you give the name, you can now click OK. And now notice the name is not system generated anymore. The name is the one that you picked. Now when you click OK at this point here, okay, the table gets created. It's called the lecturer table. Say it again. I hit primary key. Everybody have lecture ID? Oh, sorry, lecture table? Okay, now, something I told you a little while ago, and that was that this is a QBE, right? Query by example. You didn't write anything, it wrote everything for you. So if you want to see what has been written for you by the system, this is how you can get to see that. So you right click on lecturer, and then you click on generate SQL. And here, if you see at the bottom, if you have the scroll bar like I have on the right, if you scroll to the bottom, you will see the generate button. You click on the generate button, it will generate the SQL for you, and we're going to display the SQL to you. So you right click, generate SQL, and here it generates the SQL for you. Okay. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. Let me view it in a larger font size. Okay. So notice this is the SQL that was created for me. That create is the command. Table is the name of the object. Table is the type of the object. Lecturer is the name of the object. Followed by the list of fields. Remember, we created a primary key, so it adds this constraint line. Then, remember the record format I was talking about? Okay, so the record format name was given, and the semicolon completes the instruction. Because SQL by definition is non-procedural. That means all instructions must be single instructions long. An instruction doesn't have to be one line long. Like this instruction is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines long. The instruction is completed only when you hit semicolon. Okay? Now, this is how you comment in SQL. You see the two hyphens? Those are all comments. Now, this is an SQL script. What does that mean? An SQL script means it will have more than one instructions. The first instruction ends over here. Done. Look at the second instruction. Remember I told you about grant? What does grant do? Gives you permissions. So it right away after creating the table, it let you do what? You can modify the table, you can delete record, you can create indexes, you can insert data, you can reference this table. Somebody else can reference this table as a primary foreign key relationship. You can select data, you can update data, you can do all of this on what? On this table. So all of these permissions are granted on this table to who? To me or you, whatever ID is mentioned. Okay? So that's basically with the grant option, you are able to do all this. If this was not given, then you would have no permission on the object that you create. Okay, so let me close the script. And this can be generated on any table. If you ever want to see the script behind the scene on a table, then you can right click on a table and generate SQL and see what script is there behind the scene. It does that, right? Yeah, in this tool you don't, but in other tools you may. If they do not support QBE, then you would have to sit there and write the SQL.